Woman hears, crying, coming from dumpster. But what she found inside changed her life forever. You learn something about silence when you work the night shift at a hospital. Real silence, I mean. The kind that settles in around 3 in the morning, when even the machines seem to hold their breath. When the fluorescent lights hum a little softer, and your footsteps echo down corridors that smell like antiseptic and something older, something you can't quite name. Fear, maybe, or hope wearing itself thin. I'd been a nurse for 11 years by then, seen enough to know that life doesn't follow the rules we write for it. Seen babies born too early, their mothers' hands shaking as they touch skin that looked too fragile to belong in this world. Seen old men slip away with their children holding vigil, the weight of goodbye hanging heavy in those sterile rooms. You think you get used to it. You don't. You just learn to carry it differently. It was late September when everything changed. The kind of autumn night that holds on to summer's warmth during the day but turns cold the moment the sun drops. I remember the wind had picked up around midnight, rattling the windows of the break room where I sat with my coffee gone lukewarm in a styrofoam cup. My shift ended at 7, and I had that hollow, floaty feeling you get when you've been awake too long, when the world starts to feel less solid around the edges. The parking lot behind the hospital was poorly lit, always had been. We'd complained about it, but nothing changed. Budget cuts, they said, priorities elsewhere. So, we walked to our cars in that weak amber glow that barely pushed back the dark, keys already in hand, aware of every shadow, every sound that didn't belong. I was halfway to my car when I heard it. At first, I thought it was a cat, high-pitched, desperate, the kind of sound that cuts through everything else. But something about it made me stop, made the hair on my arms stand up. It was coming from the dumpsters near the loading dock, those big industrial containers they use for medical waste and general trash. The sound rose and fell, insistent, alive, with something I couldn't name yet. My hands were shaking as I walked toward it. I'd like to say I was brave, that I moved without hesitation, but that wouldn't be true. Every step felt heavy, reluctant. Part of me wanted to get in my car and drive away, pretend I'd heard nothing. But there are moments when you know, somehow, that your life is about to split into before and after. This was one of them. The crying got louder as I approached. Definitely not a cat. The sound had a human quality to it, something that reached into your chest and squeezed. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and the beam cut through the darkness like a question looking for an answer it might not want to find. The dumpster on the right was overflowing, black garbage bags piled high, some of them split open with contents spilling out. The smell hit me. Then, rotting food, soiled materials, that sweet, sick odor of decay that hospitals try to hide, but never quite manage to. I gagged, pulled my collar up over my nose and mouth, and moved closer. The crying was coming from inside. I've thought about that moment 1,000 times since. The way my heart hammered against my ribs. The way the cold air burned in my lungs. The way every instinct screamed at me to call someone, anyone, to not look inside by myself. But I did look. I pulled myself up on the side of the dumpster, metal cold and rough against my palms, and shined the light down into that pit of garbage. And there, wedged between 2 black bags, half covered in what looked like old linens and cardboard, was a baby. Time does strange things in moments like that. It stretches out and compresses all at once. I remember thinking, very clearly, very calmly, this isn't real. This is exhaustion. This is my mind playing tricks after too many double shifts. Too many nights of broken sleep. But the baby moved, tiny arms flailing in the light, face scrunched up, mouth open in a cry that seemed too big for such a small body. I was in that dumpster before I knew I'd decided to climb in. Didn't think about the filth, the smell, the wrongness of it all. Just pushed aside garbage bags, my scrubs catching on sharp edges, reaching down with hands that had delivered babies and held the dying, but had never, ever done anything like this. The baby was wrapped in a thin hospital blanket, the kind we hand out to patients, worn soft from too many washings. Underneath that was a blood-stained towel, nothing else. No note, no explanation, no sign of whoever had put this child here to die. Because that's what this was. An attempt at murder, slow and cowardly, hidden in garbage like something shameful. I lifted the baby. A girl, I could see that now. And she weighed almost nothing, 5 pounds, maybe less. Her skin was mottled, bluish in places from the cold. She'd stopped crying when I picked her up, and that scared me more than the crying had. Her eyes were open, dark and unfocused, looking at me like she was trying to understand what kind of world she'd been born into. "I've got you," I whispered. "I've got you." Getting out of that dumpster was harder than getting in. I cradled the baby against my chest with one arm, used the other to haul myself up and over the edge, my muscles screaming in protest. I landed hard on the pavement, but I kept the baby safe, tucked against me like something precious, like something that mattered. The emergency room entrance was 50 yards away. I ran, really ran for the first time in years, and I didn't feel the cold or smell the garbage on my clothes, or think about anything except keeping this tiny life warm. The automatic doors whooshed open and I burst through into that bright, antiseptic world I knew so well, and suddenly there were voices, hands, people I worked with looking at me like I'd lost my mind. "Call NICU," I managed to say. "Call security. Call the police. She was in the dumpster. Someone threw her away." They took her from me then, Dr. Patterson and 2 other nurses, moving with the practiced efficiency that comes from years of emergencies. I watched them disappear through the doors to the pediatric wing, and then my legs gave out and I sat down hard on the linoleum floor, shaking so badly my teeth chattered. Security came, then the police. I told them everything, walked them out to the dumpster, watched them photograph it, bag evidence, search through garbage with gloved hands looking for answers. They found the placenta in another bag, found what might have been the clothes the mother wore, but they didn't find the mother, not that night. I should have gone home. Should have let them clean me up and send me away with someone else's jacket over my filthy scrubs. But I couldn't leave. Not until I knew she was okay. Not until I knew she was going to make it. The NICU waiting room at 4 in the morning is a lonely place. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, plastic chairs that squeak when you shift your weight, vending machines humming in the corner. I sat there with my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee I didn't drink, watching the sky outside the windows turn from black to deep blue to that pale gray that comes before dawn. There were other people there, scattered across the waiting room like survivors of some invisible disaster. A young couple huddled together, the woman's head on the man's shoulder, both of them asleep in that uncomfortable way you sleep when you can't go home. An older man pacing by the windows, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low, urgent tones to someone on the other end. A grandmother knitting, needles clicking in steady rhythm, her lips moving in what might have been prayer. We didn't speak to each other. That's the unwritten rule in places like this. Everyone's carrying their own crisis, their own fear, and there's a respect in the silence, a recognition that some things are too heavy to share with strangers. I kept seeing her face, the baby's face, scrunched up and blue-tinged in the beam of my flashlight. Kept feeling the weight of her in my arms, that terrible lightness that meant she hadn't had enough time to grow, hadn't had enough nutrition, enough care, enough anything. Kept thinking about the mother, whoever she was, wherever she was, and what kind of desperation drives someone to that choice. My phone buzzed around 5, a text from my supervisor. "Heard what happened. Take all the time you need. Let me know if there's anything I can do." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Thank you, still here, waiting for an update." The hospital was waking up around me. Shift change happening somewhere in the building, new nurses arriving, night staff preparing to leave. I heard the distant clatter of food service carts, smelled coffee brewing somewhere close by. The ordinary machinery of a Tsambyo hospital day grinding into motion, while I sat in this waiting room feeling like the world had stopped spinning. Dr. Patterson found me around 6. She was in her 50s, had grandchildren of her own, and she'd seen everything the world could throw at a child. But even she looked shaken. "She's stable," she said, sitting down beside me. "Hypothermic, dehydrated, showing signs of withdrawal. Mother was likely using during pregnancy. But she's fighting. She's a fighter." "Withdrawal?" I heard myself ask. "Opioids, we think. We won't know for sure until the tox screen comes back, but the signs are there. Tremors, irritability, poor feeding reflex. She's going to have a hard road ahead of her." I nodded, feeling something crack open in my chest. "Can I see her?" Dr. Patterson studied me for a long moment. "You should go home, get some rest. You've been through a trauma tonight, too." "Can I see her?" I asked again. She sighed, but she stood up. 5 minutes, and then you're going home, even if I have to call your supervisor. The NICU is always too bright, too warm, too full of beeping machines and worried parents trying not to fall apart. The baby was in an isolette in the corner, hooked up to monitors, an IV line running into her tiny hand. She was clean now, wrapped in warm blankets, a little pink cap on her head. She looked so impossibly small, so fragile, like a bird that had fallen from the nest too soon. Someone had wiped the grime away, the filth from the dumpster that had clung to her skin, had cleaned the dried blood from her hair, from the creases of her neck and hands, had wrapped her in hospital warmth, given her the care that should have been hers from the moment she entered the world. Looking at her now, peaceful in the isolette, you wouldn't know where she'd been. Wouldn't know that a few hours ago she'd been dying in garbage. But I knew. I would always know. I stood there looking at her, and I felt something shift inside me, some tectonic plate in my soul grinding into a new position. I'd spent 11 years taking care of other people's children, handing them back to their mothers, their fathers, their families. I'd never wanted children of my own, had convinced myself I was happy with my career, my independence, my small apartment, and my cat, and my routines. But looking at this baby, this unwanted, discarded, broken little girl who'd been thrown away like trash, I knew something had changed. I knew I couldn't walk away from this, couldn't hand her off to the system and go back to my life pretending none of it had happened. What's going to happen to her? I asked. The nurse on duty, a young woman named Michelle, who I'd trained 2 years ago, looked up from her charts. Child Services will take custody once she's stable. Foster care, probably, if they can find a home equipped to handle a baby with her needs. How long does that usually take? Michelle shrugged. Depends. Could be days, could be weeks. Medical foster homes are hard to find. I reached through the isolette port and touched the baby's hand. Her fingers, smaller than matchsticks, curled around my pinky. The grip was weak but determined, like she was holding on to the only solid thing in a world that had already tried to kill her. I want to foster her, I said. Michelle's head snapped up. Sarah, I want to foster her, I said again, more firmly this time. I'm a nurse. I can handle her medical needs. I have the space. I want to do this. You can't just... There's a process. Applications, home studies, background checks. It takes months. Then start the process, I said. Start it now. And in the meantime, I'm not leaving her. I called in sick for my next 3 shifts. First time in 11 years I'd done that. Spent the next 72 hours in the NICU, leaving only to go home and shower, change clothes, feed my cat, who seemed deeply offended by my absence. I brought my laptop, worked on the foster care application in the waiting room, made calls to social workers, filled out forms until my hand cramped. My apartment felt strange when I went back that first time. Too quiet, too orderly. Like a museum of the life I'd been living just days before. Everything exactly where I'd left it. The book open on the coffee table, the half-empty glass of water on the nightstand, my work bag dumped by the door. But I was different. I moved through those rooms like a ghost visiting a previous version of herself. I stood in the spare bedroom that I'd been using for storage. Boxes of old textbooks, winter clothes I never wore, an exercise bike I'd bought with good intentions and used exactly twice. Looked at the space and tried to imagine it as a nursery, tried to picture a crib there, a changing table, shelves full of baby things. Tried to see if this new future could fit into the old life. My cat, Luna, wound around my ankles, meowing with the indignation of an animal who'd been fed late and expected an explanation. I picked her up, buried my face in her soft fur, and let myself cry for the first time since it all happened. Just stood there in my apartment holding my cat while something fundamental shifted in my chest, in my life, in my understanding of who I was and what I was capable of. The baby, they'd started calling her Baby Jane, because that's what they do when there's no name, no family, no one to claim them, went through withdrawal hard. Watched her tiny body seize and tremble, listened to her cry in that high-pitched wail that meant she was hurting, and there was so little we could do to help. They gave her morphine, weaned her slowly, and I held her through as much of it as the nurses would let me, held her and whispered things I didn't know I believed in, about being strong, about surviving, about how the world could be cruel, but it could also be beautiful if you held on long enough to see it. The withdrawal was worse than I'd expected, even with all my years of experience. Her little body would go, rigid, back-arching, fists clenched so tight her fingernails cut into her palms. She'd scream, not cry, scream, in a way that sounded like pain so profound it had its own language. The nurses taught me how to swaddle her tight, how to reduce stimulation, how to move slowly and speak softly, how to create a cocoon of calm in the middle of her storm. I learned the rhythm of it, 2 hours of relative peace where she'd sleep, twitching in her isolette, then an hour of agony where nothing helped, and we just had to wait it out. I learned to recognize the signs, the way her breathing would change, how her face would flush, the tremor that started in her hands before spreading through her whole body. Learned to be there before the worst hit, to have my hand on her chest so she'd know she wasn't alone. Michelle, the NICU nurse, found me on day 4, slumped in the rocking chair beside the isolette, exhausted beyond reason. "You need to sleep," she said. "Real sleep, in a real bed." "I can't. Sarah, You're not helping her if you collapse. Michelle crouched down, put her hand on my knee. I know what you're doing. I know you think if you leave, she'll feel abandoned again. But she needs you healthy. She needs you sustainable. What if something happens while I'm gone? Then we'll call you. But nothing's going to happen. She's stable. The worst of the withdrawal is behind her. She's going to make it, Sarah. You both are. Detective Morrison came by on the third day. She was in her 40s, tired eyes, the kind of cop who'd seen enough to know that most crimes don't have clean endings. She sat across from me in the waiting room and went through her questions with the patience of someone who understood that trauma doesn't follow a linear path. We found the mother, she said finally. I looked up from the application I was filling out. She's 17, lives 3 blocks from here with her mother and 2 younger siblings. Didn't know she was pregnant, she says, or knew and couldn't admit it. Delivered alone in her bathroom, panicked, didn't know what to do. I thought about that. About being 17 and scared and in pain. Alone in a bathroom with a newborn you never planned for, never wanted, couldn't imagine keeping. I wanted to be angry. Part of me was angry, but mostly I just felt sad. Is she going to prison? Detective Morrison sighed. That's up to the DA. She's a minor herself, probably looking at juvenile charges, therapy, probation. But the baby, she glanced toward the NICU. The baby's officially a ward of the state now. You know that, right? I'm trying to foster her. I heard. Morrison studied me for a long moment. Can I give you some advice? I don't think I want it. I'm going to give it anyway. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. Kids like this, kids who start life this way, they carry it with them. The trauma, the drugs, the abandonment. It doesn't go away just because someone loves them. You think you're saving her, and maybe you are. But she's going to save you right back, and that's a different kind of burden. Make sure you're ready for it. I didn't know how to answer that, so I didn't. Just went back to my application forms while Detective Morrison stood up, left her card on the chair beside me, and walked away. The social worker assigned to the case was a woman named Patricia Chen. She showed up on day 5 with a clipboard and a kind smile, and the careful manner of someone who'd learned not to make promises. We sat in a conference room that smelled like old coffee, and she went through everything. My financial situation, my work schedule, my support system, my reasons for wanting to do this. You understand this would be a temporary placement, she said, until we can determine if reunification with the biological family is possible, or if adoption proceedings should begin. I understand. You understand that this baby has significant medical needs, withdrawal syndrome, potential developmental delays, possible organ damage depending on what the mother was using. This isn't like fostering a healthy infant. I'm a pediatric nurse, I said. I know what I'm getting into. Patricia looked at me over her glasses. Do you? Because most of the time, when we get cases like this, the foster parents burn out in 3 months. It's not a judgment. It's just hard. Harder than people think. I found her in a dumpster, I said, and my voice came out harder than I meant it to. I pulled her out of garbage and she held onto my finger like I was the only real thing in the world. I'm not going to burn out. I'm not going to give up on her. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded, made a note on her clipboard. I'll fast-track your application. No promises, but I'll try. Baby Jane came home with me 3 weeks later. 3 weeks of paperwork, home inspections, background checks, references. 3 weeks of watching her grow stronger, watching the tremors subside, watching her learn to feed without throwing up, watching her eyes focus and track movement like she was figuring out what this world was all about. My apartment had never felt so small or so empty. I'd set up a nursery in my spare bedroom, bought all the things you need for a baby: crib, changing table, diapers, bottles, clothes in sizes so tiny they didn't seem real. My sister had driven down from Portland to help, brought her kids to donate their old baby things, looked at me like I'd lost my mind, but loved me enough not to say it. Rachel had always been the practical one. 4 years older than me, married with 2 kids, a house in the suburbs with a backyard and a minivan, the kind of life I'd always been running from, or thought I was. She showed up at my apartment 2 days before Jane was released, carrying boxes and wearing the expression of someone preparing for battle. You know you don't have to do this, she said, unpacking tiny onesies and folding them into neat piles. You know you could still walk away. Let someone else take her. Go back to your normal life. This is my normal life now. Sarah? Rachel stopped folding, turned to look at me. I love you. You're my sister, and I support you. But I need you to hear this. It's okay to admit you're in over your head. It's okay to say this is too much. No one would judge you. I would judge me. Why? Because you heard a baby crying and helped? You did help. You saved her life. But saving her life doesn't mean you have to raise her. Those are two different things. I sat down on the floor, surrounded by baby supplies I barely knew how to use. I can't explain it. I just know I can't let her go. I can't hand her off to someone else and wonder for the rest of my life if she's okay, if she's loved, if someone's holding her when she cries. Rachel was quiet for a long time. Then she sat down beside me, shoulder to shoulder on the hardwood floor. Okay, then we do this. But you don't do it alone. I'm 2 hours away. Mom and Dad are 3. You call us when you need help, when you're overwhelmed, when it's 3 in the morning and you're losing your mind. You hear me? I nodded, throat too tight to speak. And Sarah, you're allowed to be scared. You're allowed to have doubts. Being a mother doesn't mean being fearless. It just means showing up even when you're terrified. The first night was the hardest. I laid Jane down in her crib, watched her sleep under the glow of a nightlight shaped like a moon, and I felt the full weight of what I'd done crash down on me. This wasn't a shift at the hospital I could walk away from. This was a life, completely dependent on me, and I had no idea if I was enough. She woke up crying around 2 in the morning. I stumbled out of bed, picked her up, checked her diaper, tried to feed her. She wouldn't take the bottle, just kept crying, that thin wail that meant she was uncomfortable or scared or hurting in some way I couldn't fix. I walked her around the apartment, bouncing gently, singing songs I barely remembered from my own childhood, and eventually she settled against my shoulder, her breath warm and fast against my neck. I stood there in the dark with her, looking out the window at the city lights below, and I thought about the mother. That 17-year-old girl who'd given birth alone and been so terrified she'd put her baby in a dumpster. I wanted to hate her, wanted to be righteously angry on Jane's behalf, but mostly I just felt sorry for everyone involved. Sorry for the mother who'd been a child herself. Sorry for Jane who'd been born into such chaos. Sorry for myself, standing in the dark at 2 in the morning, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. But then Jane sighed, this soft little sound, and burrowed deeper against me. And I felt that crack in my chest widen a little more. Felt something like love seeping in through the gaps. The first few months were a blur of feeding schedules, doctor's appointments, sleepless nights, and small victories. Jane rolled over for the first time at 3 months, smiled her first real smile at 4, started babbling nonsense sounds that might have been words at 5. Every milestone felt like a miracle, like evidence that despite everything, she was going to be okay. But there were setbacks too. Times when she wouldn't eat, when her weight stalled, when the pediatrician looked concerned and ordered more tests. Times when she'd cry for hours and I'd try everything. Feeding, changing, rocking, singing, walking, white noise, silence, and nothing worked. Times when I'd stand in the bathroom with the door closed, hands gripping the sink, and wonder if I was failing her. The pediatric appointments were constant those first 6 months. Dr. Reeves, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and the gentlest hands I'd ever seen, monitored Jane's development with the careful attention of someone who knew how fragile these early months were. Her weight gain is good, Dr. Reeves said during the 4-month checkup, running her hands over Jane's chubby legs. Her reflexes are normal, no signs of developmental delay so far. So far, I repeated. Sarah, Dr. Reeves looked at me over her reading glasses. Stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. I know her history. I know what she went through, but look at her. Really look at her. She's thriving. I looked at Jane on the examination table, kicking her legs and grabbing at her toes, making that gurgling sound she made when she was happy. She was thriving. But I couldn't shake the fear that it was temporary, that the damage would reveal itself later, that I'd wake up one day and discover I couldn't fix what had been broken before I found her. The trauma doesn't go away, I said quietly, even if we can't see it yet. No, Dr. Reeves agreed. It doesn't. But trauma isn't destiny. You're giving her what she needed from the start. Consistency, love, safety. That matters more than you think. I took her to physical therapy twice a week, occupational therapy once. Watched specialists monitor her development, waiting for signs of the damage that might have been done before birth. Some days were good, other days she was inconsolable, crying for hours, and nothing I did helped. Those were the nights when I'd call my sister, put her on speaker while I walked Jane around the apartment, and just listen to another adult voice reminding me I wasn't alone. Patricia came by every month for home visits, checked to see how Jane was doing, how I was doing, made notes in her files that would determine our future. I always cleaned the apartment obsessively before she arrived, made sure Jane was clean and fed and wearing her cutest outfit. Tried to project competence even when I felt like I was drowning. The home visits followed a pattern. Patricia would arrive with her clipboard and her kind but assessing eyes. She'd observe Jane, interact with her, note her development. Then she'd sit with me at the iffy kitchen table while Jane napped and we'd talk. About my support system, my finances, my emotional state, about whether I was coping, whether I had doubts, whether I'd considered the long-term implications of what I was doing. "Tell me about a hard day," Patricia said during one visit, pen poised over her notepad. "Which one?" She smiled slightly. "The hardest one since last month." I thought about it. There were so many to choose from. Last Tuesday, Jane was up all night crying. Nothing helped. I called the pediatrician at 3 in the morning, convinced something was horribly wrong. They walked me through checking for fever, checking her fontanelle, looking for signs of serious illness. Everything was normal. She was just having a hard night. "And how did you handle it?" "I cried in the bathroom for 10 minutes, then I called my sister. Then I picked Jane up and we watched the sunrise together from the living room window. She fell asleep around 6. I went to work at 8. Patricia made notes. "You went to work?" I'd already called in sick twice that week. I couldn't afford to miss another shift. "Sarah, you're allowed to take care of yourself. That's not a weakness." "I know, I stopped, trying to find the right words. "I need to prove I can do this, that I'm not going to fall apart, that she's safe with me." "Who are you trying to prove that to?" I didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe I did, but I wasn't ready to say it out loud. That I was trying to prove it to myself. That some part of me still couldn't believe I was enough for this. "You're doing well," Patricia said during one visit, watching Jane play with a rattle on the floor. She was 6 months old by then, chubby and healthy, her dark hair growing and thick. "Better than I expected, honestly." "Is there any update on the case?" I asked. "On whether she's going back to her biological family?" Patricia shook her head. "The mother terminated her parental rights, couldn't handle the stress of the charges, the therapy, the whole situation. Grandparents don't want custody. No other relatives have come forward." My heart did something complicated, relief and sadness all tangled together. "So what happens now?" "Now we start looking for an adoptive placement." Patricia paused. "Unless you're interested." I looked at Jane, at this baby who'd been thrown away and somehow ended up in my life, and I felt that crack in my chest finally split open completely. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I'm interested." The adoption process took another year. More paperwork, more home studies, more waiting for systems to grind through their procedures. I went to court 3 times, sat in rooms with lawyers and judges while they decided Jane's fate in language that felt too cold for something so human. But eventually, on a Tuesday afternoon in October, almost exactly 2 years after I'd found her, a judge signed papers that made Jane legally mine. The courthouse was downtown, one of those old buildings with marble floors and high ceilings that made every sound echo. I'd dressed carefully that morning, professional but not too formal, maternal but not overeager. Jane wore a velvet dress my mother had bought for the occasion, navy blue with white trim. She was almost 2, walking now, talking in fragments of sentences that didn't quite make sense yet, but were full of meaning anyway. We sat on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, waiting for our case to be called. Jane played with a stuffed rabbit, making it hop across my lap while humming tunelessly. Rachel sat beside me, had driven down the night before to be there. Patricia was there too, along with Jane's court-appointed advocate, a woman named Susan who'd been visiting us for months, filing reports that would tell the judge whether I was fit to be a mother. "You nervous?" Rachel asked. "Terrified." "It's going to be fine. You've done everything right, more than right." "What if the judge doesn't think so? What if they decide?" "They're not going to decide anything except that Jane belongs with you. Anyone with eyes can see that." But I couldn't shake the fear. Couldn't stop imagining some lawyer standing up and listing all my inadequacies, all the ways I'd fallen short, all the reasons Jane would be better off somewhere else. With a younger mother, a married couple, people with more money, more space, more experience, people who'd planned for a child instead of stumbling into motherhood in a hospital parking lot. When they called our case, my legs barely worked. We filed into the courtroom, me carrying Jane, Rachel behind us, Patricia and Susan taking seats in the gallery. The judge was a woman in her 50s, black, with natural hair pulled back in a neat bun, and reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked tired, like she'd been hearing cases all day, and ours was just another file in a mountain of files. But when she looked at Jane, her expression softened. Just slightly, just enough to give me hope. The hearing itself was surprisingly short. The lawyer explained the case. Baby Jane Doe, found abandoned, mother's rights terminated, foster placement with Sarah Mitchell for 18 months, now petition for adoption. Patricia testified about the home studies, about my fitness as a parent, about Jane's development and well-being. Susan gave her recommendation. The judge asked me a few questions, her voice kind but probing. Ms. Mitchell, do you understand that adoption is permanent? That you're taking on all the legal responsibilities and rights of a parent? Yes, Your Honor. And you're prepared for the challenges that may come? This child has a complicated history. There may be behavioral issues, developmental concerns, questions about her past as she grows older. I understand, and I'm prepared, or as prepared as anyone can be. I paused, gathering courage. She's already my daughter in every way that matters. This just makes it official. The judge studied me for a long moment. Then she looked at Jane, who'd been remarkably quiet through the whole thing, watching everything with those dark, serious eyes. And what's her name going to be? You've been calling her Jane? Jane Sarah Mitchell. That's a strong name. The judge made notes in her file, signed several papers, then looked up with a small smile. Congratulations, Ms. Mitchell, she's yours. That simply. 2 years of struggle, of fear, of paperwork and home visits and court dates, and it came down to 4 words. She's yours. Congratulations. We celebrated with cake in my sister's backyard, surrounded by family who'd slowly come to understand that this wasn't a phase or a crisis, but a real life we were building together. Jane, almost 2 now, wore a dress covered in flowers and got frosting all over her face and laughed this belly laugh that made everyone else laugh too. That night, after we'd gone home and I'd given Jane a bath and put her to bed, I sat in the nursery, her room now, really her room, and watched her sleep. She'd grown so much, not just physically, though she was healthy and thriving beyond anything the doctors had hoped for, but she'd grown into herself, developed this personality that was stubborn and sweet and fiercely independent. She loved animals, especially cats, loved music, would dance to anything with a beat, loved being read to, would bring me book after book until I'd read her entire library twice. I thought about that night in the parking lot, about hearing crying and deciding to investigate instead of walking away, about all the moments since then when I could have given up, handed her back to the system, admitted it was too hard. But I hadn't, and she hadn't either. Detective Morrison had been right. Jane hadn't just needed saving, she'd save me right back, save me from a life that had started to feel narrow and safe, from routines that protected me from feeling too much. She'd cracked me open and taught me that love wasn't something you planned for or controlled. It was something you stumbled into in parking lots at 3 a.m, something you pulled out of garbage and held against your chest while your world rearranged itself around this new reality. There are still hard days. Days when Jane has nightmares she's too young to explain, when her behavior suggests memories her conscious mind can't access. Days when I wonder about the drugs in her system, about what damage might reveal itself as she grows. Days when I'm so tired I can barely function, when being a single parent to a toddler feels impossible. She wakes up sometimes, screaming in the dark, not crying, screaming like she's terrified of something she can't name. I'll run to her room, find her standing in her crib, eyes wide and unfocused, not really seeing me even when I pick her up. It takes 20 minutes sometimes to calm her down, to bring her back from wherever her mind goes in those moments. Dr. Reeves says it might be night. Terrors. Might be echoes of early trauma that her body remembers even if her mind doesn't. Might be normal toddler stuff, amplified by her difficult start. We don't know. Can't know. Just have to hold her through it and hope she'll outgrow it. There are other things too. The way she hoards food sometimes, stuffing crackers in her pockets like she's afraid of going hungry. The way she panics when I'm out of sight for too long, even just in another room. The way she clings to me in crowds, fists tight in my shirt, face buried against my neck. Small things that might be nothing, or might be everything. I joined a support group for adoptive parents, meets every other Thursday in the basement of a church downtown. 12 of us sitting in a circle on folding chairs, drinking bad coffee and sharing stories. We can't tell anyone else. Stories about children who came to us damaged, about the guilt of not being enough, about the fear that love alone can't fix everything. There's a woman there named Maria who adopted twins from foster care. They were 4 when she got them, 8 now. She talks about their behavioral issues, their attachment disorder, the way they still don't trust her completely after 4 years. Talks about it with this raw honesty that makes the rest of us feel less alone. People think love is enough, Maria said one night. Think if you just love them hard enough, everything else will fall into place. But trauma doesn't work like that. It lives in their bodies, in their nervous systems. You can give them everything and they'll still flinch when you reach for them, still test you to see if you'll abandon them like everyone else did. I thought about Jane, about the way she sometimes pushes me away when I try to comfort her, then cries when I step back, about the contradiction of her need and her fear all tangled up together. "So what do we do?" someone asked. "We show up," Maria said, "every day, even when they push us away, even when it feels like we're failing. We show up and we stay consistent, and we hope that eventually they'll believe we mean it, that we're not going anywhere. But then there are the good days, days when she learns a new word or masters a new skill, days when she runs to me when I come home from work, arms outstretched, shouting, 'Mama,' like I'm the best thing she's ever seen. Days when we go to the park and she laughs on the swings, and I think about how close we came to missing all of this, how close the world came to losing her completely. I go back sometimes to the hospital where I still work, to that parking lot where everything changed, stand by those dumpsters and remember the sound of crying cutting through the night. Remember climbing in without thinking, without knowing how it would reshape everything. The dumpsters are the same, the parking lot is still poorly lit, but I'm different. Jane made me different. I work different shifts now, mostly days, some evenings, no more overnights. The hospital was understanding about that, worked with me to create a schedule that let me be a mother and a nurse. It meant less pay, fewer opportunities for advancement, but none of that mattered anymore. My ambitions had shifted, recalibrated around this small person who needed me home at night. The parking lot has new lighting now. They installed it about 6 months after I found Jane, after the story made the local news and questions were raised about security. Bright LED fixtures that turn night into day, motion sensors that track movement. Too late for Jane, but maybe not too late for someone else. I walk past those dumpsters sometimes on my way to and from shifts, and I still hear it. The crying, even though it's not there anymore, even though it was 2 years ago, some part of me will always hear it. Will always be that woman walking toward the sound instead of away from it, climbing into filth because something more important than dignity was at stake. My coworkers know the story, most of them anyway. Some were there that night, saw me burst through the doors with a baby in my arms. Others heard about it later, saw Jane when I brought her by the hospital for checkups. They treat me differently now. Not better or worse, just different. Like I've joined some club I didn't know existed. The club of people who've done something that changed them fundamentally, that split their lives into before and after. Michelle still works NICU. We have coffee sometimes in the break room, talk about Jane's milestones, about the other babies in her care. She tells me I did something extraordinary, but I don't feel extraordinary. I feel like someone who heard crying and couldn't walk away, like anyone would have done the same. But Michelle shakes her head at that. "Not everyone," she says. "Some people would have called security. Some would have driven away and told themselves it wasn't their problem. You climbed into a dumpster, Sarah. You got in there without hesitation. I hesitated. But you did it anyway. That's what matters." Jane will grow up knowing her story. I've decided that already. We will tell her about the night I found her, about the hard road we walked together, about how love sometimes arrives in the most unexpected ways. I'll tell her she's a fighter, that she survived when the world said she shouldn't, that her life matters not despite her beginning, but including it. I've started writing it down. Little pieces, fragments of that night, and everything that came after. Not for anyone else, just for her. So, when she's old enough to ask the hard questions, when she wants to know who she is and where she came from, I'll have something to give her beyond my memory, something concrete she can hold on to. I write about finding her, about the way the cold air smelled that night, the way my hands shook, the way she looked in the beam of my flashlight. I write about the NICU, about watching her fight through withdrawal, about the first time she smiled at me like she recognized something safe. I write about the doubts, the fear, the moments when I wasn't sure I could do this. But I also write about the joy, the unexpected, overwhelming joy that came with her, the way she laughs when I tickle her feet, the way she dances to music only she can hear, the way she says "mama" when she sees me, like I'm the answer to every question she's ever had. I'll give it to her someday, when she's ready, when she's old enough to understand that life is complicated, that love doesn't erase trauma, but it does make it bearable, that being wanted now matters even when you weren't wanted then. There are questions I can't answer yet, about her biological mother, about what drove a 17-year-old to such desperation, about whether there's family out there somewhere who wonder about her, who regret what happened, about what Jane will feel when she learns the truth. Anger, grief, confusion, all of it tangled together in ways I can't predict or prevent. But I can give her this, the truth told with love, the acknowledgement that her beginning was hard, but her life is valuable. That being thrown away doesn't define her worth. That she was found and fought for and cherished beyond measure. Some nights I still wake up at 3 in the morning. Old habits from years of night shifts, I guess. I'll get up, check on Jane, make sure she's breathing, make sure she's real. And I'll stand there in her doorway watching her sleep. This miracle child who transformed me into someone I never knew I could be. The apartment is different now. No longer the quiet, orderly space of a single woman living alone. Now there are toys everywhere, in baskets on shelves, scattered across the floor, in the random patterns of a toddler's play. There are crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator, board books piled on every surface, a high chair at the kitchen table. There's noise and mess and the constant evidence of life being lived. My mother came to visit last month, first time in over a year. She stood in the doorway of Jane's room, watching her granddaughter sleep, and her eyes filled with tears. "I was worried about you," she said quietly. "When you first told me what you were doing, I thought you were making a mistake, thought you were acting impulsively, that you'd regret it. And now I see how wrong I was." She turned to look at me. "You were made for this, Sarah. I don't know how I didn't see it before. You're a wonderful mother." I didn't know how to respond to that. Wonderful felt like too big a word for what I was doing, stumbling through, making mistakes, learning as I went. But maybe that's what all parents do. Maybe nobody feels adequate to the task. Maybe we all just hope that love and effort are enough. Luna has adapted surprisingly well. She was skeptical at first, offended by this small, noisy creature invading her territory. But now she sleeps in Jane's room, curled up at the foot of the crib like a guardian. When Jane cries, at night, Luna comes to get me, meowing urgently until I follow her to check. Like she understands that we're a pack now, that Jane is ours to protect. The wind still rattles the windows on autumn nights. The city still hums its endless song outside. But inside, in this small apartment that used to feel empty, there's warmth and chaos and love. There's a toddler bed shaped like a car. There's toys scattered across every surface. There's drawings taped to the refrigerator and children's books piled on every shelf. There's a life we built from nothing, from less than nothing, from a moment in a parking lot when crying cut through the silence and changed everything. We have routines now, Jane and I. Morning routines where she helps me make breakfast, standing on her step stool at the counter, helping in ways that make everything take 3 times as long, but matter more than efficiency. Bedtime routines where we read 3 books, always 3, and she points at the pictures and names everything she knows. Mama, cat, moon, tree, her vocabulary expanding daily, her understanding of the world growing in these small incremental ways that feel monumental. We go to the park on Sundays when the weather's good. There's a playground 3 blocks from the apartment, old equipment and worn grass, but Jane loves it, loves the swings especially. I push her and she laughs this full belly laugh that makes everyone around us smile, makes them stop what they're doing just to listen to this pure expression of joy. An older woman approached me there last month, must have been in her 70s, silver hair and kind eyes, sitting on a bench watching the children play. "Your daughter is beautiful," she said. "Thank you. You look young to have a child. Is she your first?" I could have lied, could have said yes and left it at that, but something in the woman's face invited honesty. "I adopted her, found her when she was a newborn. It's been an adventure." The woman smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I had a daughter once, gave her up for adoption when I was 16. Thought I was doing the right thing. I was too young, had no support, no way to care for her. But I've wondered every day since then if she was okay, if someone loved her the way I couldn't." My throat tightened. "I'm sure they did. I hope so." The woman watched Jane swing, her expression distant. "I hope she had someone who looked at her the way you look at your daughter, like she hung the moon." We sat in silence after that, watching the children play, both of us thinking about the complicated ways families are made and unmade, about the invisible threads connecting mothers and children across distances neither of them can bridge, about how love sometimes means letting go and sometimes means holding on, and the courage required for both. Funny how the smallest voices can echo the loudest, how a life can split into before and after in the space of a heartbeat, how you can spend years thinking you know who you are, what you want, what your purpose is, and then everything shifts and you realize you were just waiting for a cold night, waiting for crying you almost didn't hear, waiting for a baby in a dumpster to teach you what it means to be human. I think about alternate realities sometimes, about the version of my life where I didn't hear the crying or heard it, but called security instead of investigating myself. About the Sarah who walked to her car that night and drove home and woke up the next morning never knowing about the baby in the dumpster. About who that Sarah would be now. Still working night shifts, still living alone, still thinking she was content with her solitary life. That Sarah is a stranger to me now. I can barely remember what it felt like to be her, to live in that smaller world where my biggest concerns were work schedules and whether I'd remembered to buy cat food. Not that my concerns now are bigger exactly, just different. More grounded in something beyond myself. I wonder sometimes if Jane's biological mother thinks about her, if she lies awake at night wondering if the baby survived, if someone found her, if she's okay. Detective Morrison told me she'd terminated her rights, that she wanted no contact, no updates, no involvement. But wanting distance and not caring aren't the same thing. I hope she knows somehow that Jane is loved, that her daughter is thriving, that the desperate choice she made on what must have been the worst night of her life didn't end the way it could have. There's no instruction manual for this kind of motherhood, no guidebook for how to parent a child who came to you through trauma. I read books, talked to therapists, attend support group meetings, but in the end, I'm just figuring it out as I go. Making mistakes and learning from them, apologizing when I get it wrong, showing up every day and hoping that consistency matters more than perfection. Jane is 2.5 now. She speaks in full sentences, runs everywhere instead of walking, has opinions about everything. She wants to wear her tutu to the grocery store, insists on reading the same book 15 times in a row, refuses to eat anything green, but will devour blueberries by the handful. She's stubborn and sweet and funny and exhausting and miraculous. She calls me mama without hesitation, without any sense that our connection is anything but inevitable. To her, I've always been here, always will be. She doesn't know yet about the dumpster, about being found, about how precarious her first hours were. That knowledge will come later, when she's old enough to understand it. For now, she just knows she's loved, and that's enough. I don't know what the future holds for us. Don't know what challenges might come as Jane grows older, as her story becomes something she has to integrate and understand. Don't know if I'm doing any of this right, if I'm enough for her, if my love can fill all the spaces where there should have been something else. We're already in early intervention therapy, speech and occupational, twice a week each. The therapists are kind, patient, working with Jane on skills that come easily to other children her age, but require effort for her, following directions, transitioning between activities, regulating her emotions when she's overwhelmed. She's doing well, her occupational therapist Amy told me last week. Really well, considering her history. The sensory issues are manageable. The coordination delays are minor. She's right on track developmentally. Right on track. Those words should have been comforting, but they felt complicated. Right on track compared to what? To children who'd been wanted from the start? To children whose mothers hadn't been using during pregnancy? To children who'd spent their first hours in warmth instead of garbage? I worry, I admitted to Amy, about what we don't see yet, about problems that might show up later. You can't live in that space, Amy said gently. You can't spend these years waiting for disaster. She needs you present, not anxious about a future that might never come. She was right. But anxiety doesn't follow logic. It lives in the what-ifs and the maybes, in the knowledge that Jane's beginning was hard and some damage can't be undone. I watch her play, and I see joy and resilience and strength. But I also see fragility. See how easily her mood can shift, how quickly she can go from laughing to melting down. See the shadows of trauma in her need for control, her difficulty with change, her occasional rages that seem too big for her small body. We have bad nights still. Nights when she wakes up screaming, when nothing I do calms her, when I'm left holding her rigid body while she cries like her heart is breaking. Nights when I wonder if I'm failing her, if someone else would know what to do, would be better at this impossible task of mothering a child who's been wounded before she even had words for her pain. But we have good nights too. Nights when she falls asleep in my arms while I sing to her, her breath evening out, her body relaxing into trust. Nights when she wakes up and calls for me, and settles immediately when I appear, like my presence alone is enough to chase away whatever scared her. Nights when I stand in her doorway and watch her sleep and feel grateful beyond measure that I get to be her mother. But I know this. I heard her crying, and I didn't walk away. And that decision, that single moment of choosing to investigate instead of ignoring, to climb in instead of calling someone else, to hold on instead of letting go, that decision remade both our lives. There's a photo I keep on my bedside table. Someone at the hospital took it about a week after I found Jane, when she was still in the NICU but starting to stabilize. I'm holding her for the first time without all the wires and monitors, just her in my arms wrapped in a hospital blanket. My scrubs are wrinkled, my hair's a mess. I have dark circles under my eyes from days without real sleep. But I'm smiling, really smiling, this expression of pure wonder and terror and love all mixed together. I look at that photo sometimes when things are hard, when I'm doubting myself, when I'm exhausted, when I'm wondering if I can keep doing this. And I see that woman, younger by just 2 years but a lifetime of experience, holding a baby who should have died but didn't. And I remember what it felt like in that moment, the weight of her, the warmth, the sense that my life had just split open and everything I thought I knew had rearranged itself around this new truth. Rachel says, I saved Jane. But that's not quite right. We saved each other. She gave me purpose, transformed my life from something I was living into, something that mattered, made me braver, softer, more patient, more present, made me understand what it means to love without condition, without reservation, without holding back pieces of yourself for safety. People at work still ask me how I do it, how I manage being a single parent and working full-time and handling Jane's special needs. They say it with this tone of admiration that makes me uncomfortable, like I'm doing something exceptional. But I don't feel exceptional. I feel like someone who made a choice and is living with the consequences, beautiful, difficult, transformative consequences. You're so strong, they say, but I'm not strong. I'm just stubborn. Stubborn enough to refuse to give up when things get hard. Stubborn enough to keep showing up even when I'm tired and overwhelmed and sure I'm failing. Stubborn enough to believe that love matters, that it's enough, even when evidence suggests otherwise. Or maybe that's not stubbornness. Maybe that's just parenthood. Maybe every parent feels inadequate and exhausted and terrified they're screwing up their kid. Maybe the only difference is I don't have a partner to share the burden with, to reassure me I'm doing okay, to take over when I need a break. But I have my sister. Have my parents, who visit more often now, who've fallen in love with their unexpected granddaughter. Have my support group and my coworkers and friends who've circled around me and Jane, creating a network of care that makes the hard days bearable. Some roads don't lead anywhere. They just teach you something on the way. This road, this unexpected journey from nurse to mother, from stranger to family, it's taught me that love is stronger than trauma, that hope is stubborn, that life finds a way even when the world tries to snuff it out. I've learned that motherhood isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about showing up day after day, even when you're tired, even when you don't have all the answers, even when you're sure you're doing it wrong. It's about holding space for another person's pain while managing your own. About celebrating tiny victories and surviving devastating setbacks. About learning to see the world through someone else's eyes and finding it both more beautiful and more terrifying than you ever imagined. I've learned that healing isn't linear. Jane has good months and hard months, easy weeks and impossible weeks. Progress isn't a straight line, but a messy zigzag full of setbacks and breakthroughs that come without warning. I've learned to celebrate the breakthroughs without expecting them to last, to weather the setbacks without losing hope that things will improve. I've learned that you can do something terrifying and survive it. Can climb into a dumpster not knowing what you'll find. Can bring home a baby with no preparation and figure it out as you go. Can become a mother overnight and somehow, improbably, be good enough at it. Not perfect, never perfect, but good enough. The anniversary comes around every September, the date I found her. I don't make a big deal out of it. That feels too complicated, too heavy with meaning that Jane isn't ready to understand. But I mark it privately, light a candle, write in the journal I'm keeping for her, sit with the weight of the night and everything that's come from it. This year, I took her to the park. Same one we go to every Sunday, but on this specific date it felt different, weighted with significance only I could feel. I pushed her on the swings and watched her laugh and thought about how close we came to missing all this. How easily she could have died in that dumpster, her cries unheard, her life over before it really began. "Higher, Mama!" she shouted, and I pushed her higher. "You're flying," I told her. "I'm flying," she agreed, delighted by the idea. And watching her swing against the blue September sky, I thought about second chances, about how life sometimes gives us opportunities to do something that matters, to make a choice that changes everything, about how we don't always recognize those moments when they arrive, but they come anyway, demanding something from us we didn't know we had to give. And on the hard days, when I'm exhausted and frustrated and wondering if I'm failing her, I remember that night. Remember that baby in the garbage, fighting to live despite everything. Remember lifting her out and feeling her grip my finger with that desperate strength. Remember thinking, I've got you, and I still do. I've still got her, and somehow, impossibly, she's got me too. I keep that thought close on the worst days. Days when nothing goes right, when Jane is having meltdown after meltdown, and I'm at the end of my patience. Days when work is overwhelming and money is tight and I can't remember the last time I had an hour to myself. Days when I question every decision I've made and wonder what I was thinking, trying to do this alone. Those days I make myself remember, force myself to go back to that parking lot, to that moment when I heard crying and had to decide. Walk away or investigate, call someone else or climb in myself, leave her to fate or take responsibility for what I'd found. I chose to climb in, and that choice, impulsive, terrifying, life-altering, is one I'd make again, every time, without hesitation, because Jane has taught me things I couldn't have learned any other way, about resilience and courage and the stubborn insistence of life, even in the darkest places, about how love can grow in the most unexpected soil, about how we're all just trying to survive, to matter, to leave the world a little better than we found it. The apartment is quiet now. Jane's asleep finally, after a bedtime routine that stretched to an hour because she needed 3 more books, 4 more songs, 5 more minutes of back rubbing before she could let go and drift off. Luna's curled up at the foot of my bed, purring softly. The city outside my window is settling into night, lights glowing in 1,000 other apartments where 1,000 other lives are unfolding. I'm tired, bone deep, soul tired in the way that comes from giving everything you have and then finding a little more. But it's a good tired. An earned tired, the kind that comes from doing something that matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Tomorrow I'll wake up and do it all again. We'll feed Jane breakfast and get her dressed and take her to therapy and go to work and pick her up and come home and make dinner and give her a bath and read her stories and tuck her in. We'll navigate the mundane and miraculous moments that make up our days. We'll probably make mistakes and definitely lose my patience and almost certainly wonder if I'm enough. But I'll show up. That's what I've learned these past 2 years. You don't have to be perfect or fearless or know what you're doing. You just have to show up. Keep showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That's what love is. That's what family is. Not the absence of struggle, but the commitment to struggle together, to not walk away when things get difficult. The trail behind us is long and winding. The trail ahead is uncertain, but we're walking it together, this unwanted baby and the woman who couldn't walk away. Building a life from a moment of crisis. Becoming family in the space where tragedy tried to write a different ending. There are still questions without answers. Still moments when I look at Jane and wonder what she'll think when she's old enough to understand her story. Will she be angry? Grateful? Some complicated mix of both. Will she want to find her biological mother? To understand what happened? To make sense of why she was left to die? Will she struggle with identity? With belonging? With the knowledge that her life began with rejection? I don't know. Can't know. Can only promise myself that I'll be honest with her, that I'll help her navigate whatever feelings come up, that I'll never make her feel like her questions are a betrayal of our bond. Her story is hers to understand and process. My job is to love her through it. Patricia came by last week for what she said would be her final check-in. The adoption was finalized 6 months ago, the case officially closed. But she wanted to see how we were doing, she said. Wanted to make sure Jane was thriving. We sat at my kitchen table drinking coffee while Jane played in the living room, building elaborate towers with blocks and knocking them down with shrieks of delight. Patricia watched her with the expression of someone who's seen too many cases end badly and takes joy in the ones that end well. "You did good, Sarah," she said. "Better than I expected, if I'm honest. Most foster placements like this don't work out. The trauma's too fresh, the needs too complicated. But you two, you fit together, like you were always meant to find each other." "I don't believe in meant to be," I said. "I believe in choices, in being present enough to hear crying and human enough to respond to it." Patricia smiled. "Fair enough, but choice or fate, it doesn't matter. What matters is she's loved, she's safe, she has a mother who'd move mountains for her. That's what every child deserves, even if most don't get it." After Patricia left, I sat on the floor with Jane and helped her build towers. She was getting good at stacking now, her small hands more coordinated, her concentration improving. She'd place each block carefully, tongue sticking out in focus, then clap when the tower stood. "Look, Mama, I see. You're such a good builder. I build big. You do, the biggest towers." And in that simple moment, mother and daughter on the floor, playing with blocks, speaking the private language of love that doesn't need big words or complicated explanations, I felt the weight of the past 2 years settle into something like peace, not perfect peace. Not the absence of worry or doubt or fear about what comes next, but the peace that comes from knowing you did the right thing, even when it was the hard thing, even when it changed everything. That's what love does, I think. It hears crying in the dark and refuses to ignore it. It climbs into dumpsters and pulls out miracles. It says, "I've got you," and means it, every single day, even when everything else says to give up. Love is showing up at 3 in the morning when she's having nightmares. Love is missing work because she's sick. Love is sitting through therapy appointments and doctor visits and explaining her story to strangers who need to understand her background. Love is patience when she's testing boundaries. Love is firmness when she needs structure. Love is flexibility when she needs grace. Love is being present in all the tiny moments that don't feel significant, but add up to a childhood, to a life, to a sense of security that maybe, just maybe, can overcome the trauma of her beginning. Love is also taking care of myself so I can take care of her. I'm learning that now, slowly, learning that it's not selfish to need breaks, to ask for help, to admit when I'm struggling. Rachel comes down once a month now, takes Jane for the weekend so I can sleep and clean and breathe and remember who I am outside of being a mother. My parents visit more often, have embraced their role as grandparents with enthusiasm I didn't expect. "We're sorry we weren't more supportive at first," my mother said during their last visit. "We were scared for you, worried you were taking on too much, but we were wrong. You've built something beautiful here. Something beautiful, yes. Imperfect and chaotic and exhausting, but beautiful. A family forged not from biology or planning, but from crisis and choice and stubborn refusal to give up. A family that exists because I heard crying and decided it mattered more than convenience, more than safety, more than the orderly life I'd been living. The nights are easier now than they were at first. Jane sleeps through most of them, wakes maybe once or twice instead of every hour. Her night terrors are less frequent, less intense. She's learning to self-soothe, to reach for the stuffed rabbit she sleeps with, instead of immediately screaming for me. Small steps toward independence that both relieve me and break my heart a little. Because that's the paradox of parenthood, isn't it? You spend years trying to help them become independent, trying to give them the skills and confidence to not need you. And then they start not needing you, and it's exactly what you wanted and also completely devastating. But Jane is only 2.5. There are years ahead of us still. Years of firsts. First day of school, first lost tooth, first heartbreak. Years of teaching her how to be in the world, how to be kind and strong and honest. Years of watching her become whoever she's going to become, of stepping back slowly while remaining constant in the background, a safe place to return to when the world gets too big or too scary. I think about the woman I was before Jane, remember her clearly but distantly, like remembering a character in a book I read long ago. She had a good life, a meaningful career, close relationships, hobbies and interests and routines that brought her satisfaction. But she was playing it safe, living small, avoiding the kinds of risks that might break her open. Jane broke me open, cracked me like an egg, and everything I'd been protecting spilled out, and there was no putting it back. No returning to that careful, contained life once I'd experienced the wild, terrifying expansiveness of loving someone more than myself. The night shift still calls to me sometimes. That quiet darkness, that sense of being between worlds, the weight of other people's emergencies. But I work days now. Come home to Jane waiting at the window, her face lighting up when she sees my car. Come home to chaos and laughter and sticky hands and bedtime stories. Come home to a life I never planned but can't imagine living without. Sometimes coworkers from the night shift ask if I miss it. The camaraderie, the intensity, the different rhythm of working while the world sleeps. And yes, I miss parts of it. Miss the quiet hallways, the bond you form with people who understand that particular kind of exhaustion. Miss being the person who was there in people's darkest hours, offering competence and compassion when they needed it most. But then I think about what I'd be missing if I still worked nights. Would miss tucking Jane in, reading her bedtime stories, being there when she wakes from bad dreams. Would miss lazy Saturday mornings where we stay in pajamas until noon. Would miss the ordinary moments that make up a life. Breakfast together, walks to the park, bath time giggles. Would miss so much of her childhood, would blink and find her grown, and what would I have to show for all those missed moments? No, I made the right choice. Work is what I do. Jane is who I am now. That shift in identity was hard at first, uncomfortable in the way all transformations are. But I've grown into it, learned to define myself not just by my career, but by my relationships, my commitments, my choice to show up every day for this small person who needs me. The hospital parking lot is well lit now, but I still think about it every time I walk to my car. Still remember the weak amber glow that barely pushed back the darkness, the shadows that hid so much. Still hear the crying even though it's long gone, absorbed into the past, where it lives as memory rather than present reality. A young nurse asked me about it last month. New to the unit, had heard the story somehow, wanted to know if it was true, if I'd really found a baby in a dumpster. Yes, I told her. September 2 years ago. She's mine now, adopted her officially last year. The nurse looked at me with this expression of awe that made me uncomfortable. I don't know if I could do that, take on someone else's baby, all those complications. She's not someone else's baby, I said, more sharply than I intended. She's my baby. The complications come with the territory. All kids have complications. We just know hers sooner than most parents know theirs. The nurse apologized, said she didn't mean to offend, and I softened, remembered that she's young, doesn't understand yet how love rewrites your understanding of what's possible, what's worth fighting for. It's the best thing I ever did, I told her. The hardest and the best. If you ever hear crying, in a parking lot, in an alley, anywhere, don't walk away. You never know what you might find. And sometimes, when the wind picks up on autumn nights, when the air turns cold and the world feels vast and uncertain, I think about the woman I was before, the one who walked through parking lots alone, who went home to silence, who thought she'd figured out her path. I think about that woman hearing crying and making a choice. I think about how we're all just one choice away from becoming someone new, one decision away from love we never expected, one moment of courage away from transformation. Jane is that moment for me, that choice, that transformation. And every day, every single day, I'm grateful I didn't walk away. I stand at her doorway now, in the soft darkness of her room, lit only by the moon-shaped nightlight, watching her chest rise and fall in the rhythm of sleep. She's sprawled across her toddler bed, covers kicked off despite the chill, one arm flung above her head like she's reaching for something even in dreams. Luna is curled up beside her, protective and patient, opening one yellow eye to check that I'm not a threat before settling back into sleep. This is my life now. These quiet moments of observation, of bearing witness to her existence. These small miracles, her breathing, her growing, her becoming. I never knew I could love something so fiercely, so completely, with a desperation that sometimes scares me in its intensity. What if something happens to her? What if I'm not enough? What if the trauma resurfaces in ways I can't handle? What if she grows up and hates me for not being what she needed? The fears circle like vultures, persistent and patient, waiting for moments of weakness to swoop in. But then she stirs, makes that little sighing sound she makes in her sleep, and the fears recede. Because here, in this moment, she's safe, she's warm, she's loved, and maybe that's all any of us can do. Control this moment, this day, this space where we have power. The future is unknowable, the past is unchangeable, but right now, she's here, and I'm here, and we're together. There's a saying I heard somewhere about how the days are long, but the years are short. I understand that now in a way I couldn't have before Jane. The days are impossibly long, hours of feeding and changing and playing and redirecting and managing meltdowns and counting down until bedtime. But the weeks blur together, the months fly past, and suddenly she's 2.5, and I'm wondering where the time went. She was 6 pounds when I found her, now she's 30. Was silent and still in that dumpster, barely alive. Now she never stops moving or talking, fills every room with her presence. Was no one's daughter. Now she's mine, completely and legally and forever. The transformation isn't just hers, it's mine too. I'm not the woman who found her anymore. That woman was younger, more naive, less tested. Thought she understood love because she'd loved her family, her friends, even her cat. But she didn't understand, couldn't understand until she held a dying baby and felt her own heart crack open to make room for someone else's life. This is what motherhood does. It remakes you from the inside out. Changes your priorities, your perspective, your understanding of what matters, makes you braver and more afraid all at once, makes you want to protect this small person from every danger while knowing you can't, that the world will hurt them eventually, and all you can do is teach them how to heal. I pull the covers back up over Jane, though I know she'll kick them off again within minutes, tuck her, stuffed rabbit under her arm, press my palm gently against her forehead, checking for fever, even though there's no reason to worry. Old habits from those early months when every change in her breathing, every fluctuation in her temperature sent me into panic mode. I love you, I whisper, too quiet to wake her. I'll always love you, no matter what. And I mean it. Whatever comes, behavioral issues, developmental delays, questions about her past, struggles with identity. I'll be here. I'll love her through it, because that's what I signed up for when I climbed into that dumpster. Not just to save her life, but to be her mother. All of it. The beautiful parts and the broken parts and everything in between. I walk back to my own room, leaving her door cracked open the way she likes it, so she can see the light from the hallway if she wakes. Climb into bed, but don't turn off the lamp yet. Just sit there against the headboard, listening to the sounds of the apartment settling for the night. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the radiator, the distant sounds of the city beyond our walls. This small life we've built. This fragile, precious thing that exists because I made a choice on a cold September night 2 years ago. Because I heard crying and couldn't ignore it. Because something in me recognized that sound as a call I was meant to answer, even though I didn't know it at the time. I think about all the people who played a part in this story. Dr. Patterson, who stabilized Jane those first critical hours. Michelle, who taught me how to hold a baby going through withdrawal. Detective Morrison, who found Jane's biological mother and handled the case with compassion for everyone involved. Patricia, who fast-tracked my foster application and believed I could do this when I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Rachel, who dropped everything to help me set up a nursery and has been there for every crisis since. My parents, who came around eventually and loved Jane as fiercely as they loved me, and Jane herself. This tiny human who fought to survive when everything was against her, who held onto my finger in the NICU like she was holding on to life itself, who learned to trust me even though every human who touched her in those first hours had either abandoned her or hurt her, who smiles when she sees me and calls me mama and makes me feel like I'm someone's whole world. The journal I'm keeping for her is on my nightstand. I pick it up, open to a blank page, and start writing. About tonight. About standing in her doorway watching her sleep. About how the ordinary moments are the ones that matter most. Not the dramatic rescue or the legal battles or the medical crises, but the quiet nights when she's safe and warm, and I get to be the one who tucks her in. I write, "You were sleeping tonight with your arm over your head, the way you always do. Luna was curled up beside you. You'd kicked off your covers even though it's cold. I covered you back up and you didn't wake, just made that little sound you make, like a sigh of contentment. I stood there for a long time, watching you breathe, thinking about how lucky I am, how lucky we both are, that I heard you crying that night, that I didn't walk away, that somehow, impossibly, we found each other in the dark." I closed the journal and set it back on the nightstand. Tomorrow, I'll add more. The story of us is still being written, still unfolding in these daily moments of care and connection. Some days the story feels triumphant, other days it feels like survival, but it's ours. This messy, beautiful, complicated story of how a nurse and a discarded baby became a family. The lamp clicks off. Darkness settles over the room. In the distance, I can hear Jane's even breathing, Luna's occasional movement, the sounds that mean everyone is safe and accounted for. I close my eyes and let exhaustion pull me under, knowing that in a few hours I'll wake to do it all again, and I'm ready for that. Ready for whatever tomorrow brings, tantrums or laughter, setbacks or breakthroughs, ordinary moments or extraordinary ones. Ready to keep showing up, keep loving her, keep building this life we're creating together. Because in the end, that's what it comes down to. Not the dramatic rescue or the legal victory, or even the love that feels too big to contain sometimes. It comes down to showing up, day after day, night after night, in the boring and the beautiful and the broken moments. Showing up and saying, "I'm here, I've got you, you're not alone." That's what I promised her that night in the dumpster, when I lifted her out of the garbage and held her against my chest. I've got you, and I meant it then just as I mean it now, 2 years later, lying in my bed listening to her breathe in the next room. I've got you. And somehow, miraculously, she's got me too. The wind rattles the windows one more time, a reminder that autumn is deepening into winter, that the world keeps turning, that life keeps moving forward whether we're ready or not. But inside these walls, we're warm, we're safe, we're together. And that's enough. That has to be enough. Because it's everything. In the morning, Jane will wake up calling for me. I'll stumble into her room, still half asleep, and she'll reach up from her bed with those small arms, wanting to be held. I'll pick her up, and she'll wrap herself around me like a barnacle, face buried in my neck, and we'll stand there for a moment in the early light while she wakes up slowly, transitioning from sleep to the new day. Then we'll have breakfast. She'll insist on helping. We'll make a mess. We'll spill milk and get syrup in her hair. We'll brush her teeth, get her dressed, argue about whether she can wear her princess shoes to therapy. We'll drive across town, sing songs in the car, stop for a treat if she's good at her appointment. Then I'll drop her at daycare, kiss her goodbye, promise I'll be back soon, even though she always cries when I leave. I'll go to work and be a nurse again. We'll take care of other people's children. We'll remember what it's like to be professional and competent and not covered in someone else's bodily fluids. We'll have adult conversations about medical protocols and patient outcomes. We'll drink coffee that's actually hot. We'll feel like myself for a few hours, the self I was before Jane. But then the shift will end and I'll drive back to pick her up. And the moment I see her face light up, Mama, I'll remember who I really am now. Not just a nurse, not just Sarah, but Jane's mother. And that identity, the one I never planned for or expected, has become the truest thing about me. This is the life I saved that night. Not just Jane's, mine too. Because I was dying slowly in that careful, contained existence I'd built. Dying of safety, of routine, of protecting myself from anything that might crack me open. And then I heard crying, and I climbed into a dumpster, and I pulled out a baby who needed saving. But she saved me right back, cracked me open, and let the light in. Made me human again in ways I'd forgotten I could be. Made me brave enough to love without guarantees, to commit without knowing how it would turn out, to take the biggest risk of my life on a cold September night. And now, here we are, 2 years later, a family, imperfect and unconventional and stitched together from crisis and choice, but a family nonetheless. Real and solid and worth every hard moment it took to get here. The darkness is complete now. The city has gone quiet. Even Luna has stopped moving. It's just me and the sound of my own breathing and the knowledge that in the next room, my daughter sleeps. My daughter. Those words still feel miraculous sometimes, still catch in my throat with their weight and meaning. Tomorrow the sun will rise. Jane will wake up. We'll do it all again. And the day after that. And the day after that. Building this life one moment at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time. That's what it means to be a mother, I think. Not the biology or the planning or even the legal paperwork that makes it official. It means hearing crying in the dark and refusing to walk away. It means climbing into the garbage to pull out something precious. It means saying I've got you and meaning it forever. It means showing up, and I will, every day, for as long as she needs me, for as long as I breathe, because she's mine and I'm hers, and nothing that came before matters as much as what we're building now. This life, this family, this love that started in the most unlikely place and grew into something neither of us could have survived without. Sleep finally comes, deep and dreamless. The kind of sleep that comes from exhaustion, but also from peace. The knowledge that I did the right thing, that despite everything, the fear, the doubt, the struggle, we made it, we're making it, and we'll keep making it, one day at a time, for all the days to come. In the darkness, in the quiet, I hear it one more time. Not real, just memory. The sound of crying cutting through a September night, the sound that changed everything. The sound I'll carry with me forever. A reminder of the moment my life split into before and after. I heard her crying, and I didn't walk away. That's the whole story, really. Everything else, the rescue, the adoption, the daily work of mothering, it all comes back to that single choice. To hear suffering and respond to it, to see something discarded and recognize its value, to take what the world threw away and say, this matters, this life matters, and I'm going to prove it every day for the rest of my life. The wind settles, the city sleeps. And inside this small apartment, a mother and daughter rest, both of them saved by the same cold night 2 years ago. Both of them alive because someone heard crying and decided it couldn't be ignored. This is what love does. This is what it looks like. This is what it means to be human.